I'm a notorious bad woman in Beijing's elite circles who fell for an aloof and cold-hearted poor student. From then on, I devoted myself to loving him alone. We kissed from the hallway to the couch, and as our passion grew uncontrollable, just when we were about to take things further, his phone rang. After checking his phone, he said he needed to take a shower. On a whim, I picked up the phone with the screen still on and saw the wallpaper was an unfamiliar girl. The message read, "Calvin, I'm so cold. Wanna come hug me?" The attached picture showed the girl in a revealing outfit with her legs spread open. I sent this photo straight into their group chat. "She's cold. Which one of you is going to warm her up?" The charged atmosphere dissipated in an instant. Frowning, I scrolled through the entire chat history between Calvin and this girl from start to finish. It turned out that they had been hooking up since Calvin and I were together. During the day, Calvin would be entangled with me in intimacy, and by late night, he'd sneak off to his mistress's place. Is he not afraid of being drained to death? How was the skank? Did she drain you dry again today? Next time, find a way to let us have a try too. Anyway, Katarina's just a public bus. What's the difference with one more or one less person? About that camera installation I proposed earlier, Calvin, have you considered it? Hey, why are you guys talking like that? At least she's Calvin's girlfriend. So not only was he hooking up with other girls, but there was also a private group I wasn't even aware of. Technology is so advanced that there are dual systems, and now he's pulling this damn dual system bullshit on me too? In one of Calvin's dual system interfaces, the wallpaper is me, while the other features this woman. I was trembling with rage, wiping the snot running down my face. I quickly took a screenshot of the chat history and sent it to Calvin and that girl's private group. "She's cold. Who's going to warm her up?" The once lively group chat instantly fell silent, with only one member frantically spamming stickers in a desperate attempt to bury the messages. As she spammed, I kept reposting. "Since you love acting so slutty, then indulge yourself to the fullest." What are you looking at? Calvin strode over with a towel around his waist, wordlessly pinning me to the bed as he roughly bit at my neck. As his breathing grew heavier, so did mine. But he was driven by sheer lust. I felt both anger and sadness. "Calvin, I'm so cold. Can you hold me?" Calvin stiffened instantly, propping himself up on his elbows to look at me. "What did you do to her?" Without waiting for my response, Calvin immediately rose to grab his phone and check it. After just a few glances, his aloof face contorted with rage. "Linwin, are you fucking insane?" The man once praised for remaining unflappable even if Mount Tai collapsed before him, now flew into a thunderous rage, flames in his pupils scorching enough to incinerate bystanders. I suppressed the ache in my heart and retorted defiantly, "She's cold. I got her few more brothers to warm her up. What's wrong? Does it hurt your feelings? She's my junior. I've always treated her like family. How could you humiliate her like this? She's a decent girl. How dare you tarnish her reputation like that? You think she's as slutty as you? What the fuck are you, and who the hell is she?" Calvin cursed while putting on his clothes, each word stabbing deep into my heart. Promiscuous? In his heart, was I truly such a disgraceful woman? My heart felt cleaved by a blunt blade, each cut excruciating. "She sent you those kinds of photos and you still call her your sister? How many times have you two slept together?" Calvin paused for a moment, then glared at me with furrowed brows. "The number of times I've been with her matches yours exactly. Satisfied now?" "Slut, we're done. I've had enough of your spoiled princess attitude." I was so furious I was left speechless. A cramping pain seized my stomach, and I sank weakly to the floor, breaking into a cold sweat from the agony. My chronic stomach condition flared up. I bit my lip and weakly reached out a hand toward Calvin, desperately pleading, "My stomach, it's acting up. Calvin, get me to the hospital." Fusheng had already dressed and shot me a cold glance before heading for the door. "Your acting skills are getting better and better, Miss Lin. Don't think you can keep me with tricks like this. Even if you beg on your knees pleading for forgiveness, I won't bat an eye." Bang! The door slammed shut as Calvin stormed out. The pain in my body made me curl up on the floor. I didn't even notice I had bitten my lip until I tasted the blood. Is this the man I devoted myself to loving for 3 years? As my consciousness faded, I lost consciousness completely. My dad's a nouveau riche, and I'm his only daughter, so I've been spoiled rotten and act completely lawless. I love good-looking boys and pay to have them as my boyfriends. I would change boyfriends almost every week until I met Calvin. He was the impoverished student everyone knew at school, aloof, resilient, and unyieldingly persistent, consistently ranking among the top 10 academically in the entire school. It wasn't just his academic excellence. His striking good looks were equally remarkable. When I first proposed to pursue him, Calvin remained icily indifferent, refusing to even look me in the eye. He merely responded with a frigid, "Do as you please." His cold arrogance struck right at my heart. That was when I made up my mind to pursue him, and I chased after him relentlessly for an entire year. During that year, I stayed disciplined, ignoring everyone else, including after we started dating. If Calvin didn't love me, why would he agree to be with me? And after all the times we've been together, he never showed any sign of disgust. Fortunately, the nanny returned to retrieve something and managed to rush me to the hospital just in time. After a day of rest, I felt much better and was preparing to leave the hospital. It's always those random coincidences in stories that seem to happen in real life. As soon as I stepped out, I saw a glaring scene. "Calvin, thank you so much for coming to keep me company." The girl looked much purer than she did in her photos. She wore a long white dress, with straight black hair cascading to her waist and delicate, finely chiseled facial features. She had a bit of a White Lotus aura. She was nestled shyly in Calvin's arms and, when he wasn't looking, secretly rose on tiptoe to kiss him on the cheek before quickly turning her face away. Calvin looked slightly dazed for a moment, then let out a soft chuckle, his fingers lingeringly tracing the spot where she'd kissed him. What a handsome and beautiful pair, if I didn't know their true colors. Is that Katerina, sis? As soon as the girl saw me, she quickly hid behind Calvin, her eyes filled with fear as she looked at me like I was some kind of monster. She looked at me as if I were a monster. Calvin's lips, which had been curved into a faint smile, immediately fell. His eyes were cold, devoid of any warmth. "What are you doing here? Have you resorted to stalking me now? Katerina, can't you stop being so disgusting? Even if you die right now, I still won't forgive you." "Forgive me? Forgive what?" Ever since Calvin abandoned me, this blazing heart of mine has ceased to beat for him. The two of them began their act as though performing in a play. "Calvin, you shouldn't be so mean to sister. She just likes you too much. Her affection is too tainted. I can't accept it." Calvin continued to stare at me, enunciating each word clearly. "If you kneel and apologize now, I can still forgive you." At the peak of my anger, I actually laughed. "Apologize for what? Your sister was cold, so I got people to warm her up. You should be grateful instead of putting on this act. Who are you trying to impress?" "Katerina, how could you say that about brother? And you, pretentious coquette. My mother only gave birth to me. I never had a sister. If you try to climb into our family, I swear I'll slap you." As soon as I finished, the girl started crying uncontrollably on the spot. She grabbed Calvin's arm, sobbing dramatically. If I hadn't noticed her 34A bust rubbing against his arm, I might have believed she was just having a simple emotional breakdown. How cheap. I used to be just like her. How could I not see through this act? But I stopped using these tricks 5 years ago. Men love this kind of thing, just a little touch. Calvin charged over and slapped me across the face. "Say one more word and see what happens." I turned my head away and licked the blood at the corner of my mouth. I had been hoping for a peaceful resolution. Now I was truly furious. Calvin always acts so high and mighty, but in private, he's a total jerk who loves to hit people. Calvin stared at the hand that had just slapped me, his eyes panicked as he looked at me and explained. "Katerina, I didn't mean to. Does it hurt?" He stepped closer to me, but I took a few steps back, rejecting him. "Katerina, let me check how bad it is. I'll get you an ice pack." I scoffed. "You've already hit me. Now you're pretending to care?" Such hypocritical sanctimony. His steps faltered, and he looked at me helplessly. Katerina, I really didn't mean to. Let me take you to ice it. Calvin, my stomach hurts so badly. Can you take me to see a doctor? The girl suddenly screamed, clutching her stomach in apparent agony. So, who will you choose? It didn't matter who he chose. Nothing could alter my resolve to end things with him. The next moment, without hesitation, Calvin strode over and swept the girl up into his arms. A rare hint of guilt appeared on his beautiful face, and he didn't even dare meet my eyes. Katerina, I'll take Luna there first. I'll help you ice it later. As the girl left, she cast me a triumphant look. I watched them walk away. No need. Calvin stumbled, almost falling. In that moment, he clearly felt that something was about to be lost. He couldn't help but look back. The crowd behind him was bustling, but the figure that had always stood proudly was nowhere to be seen. When I got home, I immediately told my mom to terminate the financial aid for Calvin. Our school is one of the top 3 in the country, with abundant educational resources, but the tuition fees are extremely high. Calvin's scholarship was nowhere near enough to cover the tuition fees, and it was I who had my mom arrange anonymous financial support for him. Looking back, it was truly ridiculous. I had treated him like a delicate treasure, worried about hurting his pride. And yet he treated me like a fool. Katerina, can I move up? An unfamiliar account I had never chatted with suddenly popped up. It was time for me to get back into the game. Send over the health checkup results first, and then I'll consider. In the next moment, a few pictures were sent. I smiled slightly, intrigued. I just had this done yesterday. Don't worry, I'm clean. I know your requirements. Yes, I was the type of woman who could fall for anyone I met. But I was also afraid of getting sick, so I always made sure the men I saw were properly checked out. I quickly sent an address. Go to this place and do it again. Could this person be trusted not to fake it? I preferred going to a hospital where there were people I knew. The man didn't refuse and instead sent a video. He looked delicate, his face seemed fragile, but his body was decent. The video showed him shirtless, twisting a bottle cap off with his abs. A bit greasy, but his face was good. I casually updated my WeChat status. Almost instantly, a familiar profile picture liked my post, then immediately unliked it, pretending to be aloof and virtuous. If nothing's wrong, you shouldn't join too many random groups. A completely unrelated group suddenly started criticizing me. Linwin, what are you pretending now? You chased down our god Fu, and now you're neglecting him? How can trash like you even qualify as a woman? She says she's settling down for love, but she's just lying. Thought nobody was keeping an eye on Calvin, huh? You're just a nouveau riche who got picked up by a cultured man. Now you better keep your place and stop acting like a public bus. I heard she pissed Calvin off. Could she be trying to get his attention with this kind of stunt? Yeah, her reputation's already ruined. Who would want a woman like her except for Calvin, who has a good heart? She probably paid someone to piss Calvin off. I think it's good that Calvin's away from this woman. She used her family's influence to force him into a relationship. Now he's finally free. We should throw a party to celebrate. I quickly skimmed through the messages. The ones leading the charge were the same people who used to make dirty jokes in Calvin's small group. They relied on Calvin to pass exams and barely scraped through. To them, Calvin was more important than their own fathers. This world is strange. When a man sleeps with many women, it's considered a boastful achievement, a conversation piece that brings him status. But when a woman sleeps with multiple men, she's labeled promiscuous. No, it's not even about numbers. Once a woman loses her first, she becomes the target of attack. They pressure women with words like disgraceful, immoral, and shameless. They love to see women cry, hiding at home, too ashamed to face anyone. But I was determined to be the rebellious one. I quickly typed a counterattack. Don't pretend to be holier than thou. Do you all know who Luna is? Calvin cheated on me, and I didn't even seek revenge. That's how much face I'm giving him. Yeah, I'm from a nouveau riche family. We may not have culture, but we're rich. What about you? Your families run small businesses, right? Nouveau riche people may not be cultured, but we know how to cause some trouble. You'd better be ready to kneel and apologize to your parents. Oh, and since you love calling people public buses, why don't you record a video, call yourself a bus, and beg me for forgiveness? Then maybe I'll let your little business off the hook. By the way, anyone willing to be my dog can get $500,000 a month. First come, first served. The group immediately launched another wave of condemnation at me. Upon exiting the group chat, the friend requests page instantly hit 99 plus. Especially one from a person who loved to insult their own mother. Mom, I'm your little dog, punish me. The next day, after waking up, I sent a message to my private detective and then headed out to meet my new boyfriend. This man I knew well. His name was Samuel, the fourth-ranked top student and also Calvin's sworn rival. It seemed like Calvin was always on top, but in reality, the professors and upperclassmen favored Samuel much more. During a recent basketball match, Calvin lost to him and threw quite a tantrum. I had to buy him an expensive tie just to calm him down. What a fool I had been. It didn't take long to meet Samuel. He was far more diligent than Calvin. As soon as he saw me, he pulled out a chair and hung up my coat. Katerina, you finally arrived. Samuel courteously sat beside me, serving me dishes and pouring drinks. Thus much more pleasant to look at. I must have been out of my mind to think about some high and mighty figure. A cute little simp is so much better. How did you know I broke up with Calvin? And we've only met a few times. Are you here for the 500,000? Samuel looked at me in confusion, his fair face flushing bright red, stammering as he spoke. What 500,000? I don't know anything about that. Do you believe in love at first sight? I propped my elbow on the table, resting my chin in my hands, watching him with great interest. Are you saying you fell in love with me the first time you saw me? I've heard that line a million times. It's much more honest to just admit you're after 500,000. In the next second, Samuel jumped up, his face serious. No, it's really love at first sight. But back then, you were with Calvin, so I purposely went against him. I was jealous that he could earn your affection without even trying, yet he still doesn't cherish you. Haven't you noticed he treats every other girl better than he treats you? I thought about it carefully and realized it was indeed true. He was polite and considerate toward other women. But with me, he would frequently lose his temper, claiming I was using money to humiliate him. How foolish women become when they let love cloud their judgment. It's better to indulge your desires instead. I never hold back. I reached out, pulled Samuel closer, and kissed him. Samuel quickly reacted, kissing back, trying to take control. I pushed the dishes aside, took charge, and pinned him down on the table, letting my desires take over. We kissed passionately, unable to tear ourselves apart. Our clothes were gradually coming off, and if I hadn't remembered that this was a restaurant, I would have already gone all the way with Gu Chin. While I was catching my breath, Samuel smirked. Can't keep up, sis? Want me to take over? I smiled, running my hands over his firm abs. I'm afraid if we keep going, I won't be able to control myself. Samuel chuckled softly. Katerina, are you afraid of this? I thought the school's so-called big devil was fearless. Calvin, this restaurant is so expensive. Won't you feel like you're overspending? The atmosphere was so intimate, it felt like the air was stretching like silk. But someone just had to ruin the moment. From outside came Luna's voice, followed by the sycophantic chorus of Calvin's lackeys. Luna, don't worry. Katerina kept a card just to keep Calvin. You can eat all you want. The money's on her. Exactly, Luna. You're just too kind, always thinking of others. Now that Calvin is free from that loose woman, this single party is a great opportunity for you. Luna, you absolutely must seize this opportunity. Oh, what are you guys talking about? So they plan to use my card to show off. Hiss, did they think Calvin didn't know that I already canceled the card? This was going to be a good show. Katerina, you really care about him. The man beneath me was displeased. He flipped me onto the table and sank his teeth into my neck. It was so painful that I couldn't help cursing at him, yet the man maintained his glib demeanor with a shameless grin. He said something about punishing me a little. I smiled knowingly and continued kissing him. A few minutes later, I pushed him away. If I didn't stop now, this would have gone too far. Samuel looked at me, still wanting more, his face filled with unsatisfied desire. Like a dog, I gently kicked him, but he grabbed my foot. Seeing that he still wanted to do something more, I couldn't help but warn him. It's over. Behave yourself. Samuel immediately released me, looking worried. Did I make you angry? I ignored him and transferred 10,000 yuan to him. I can't stand men who lack boundaries. Impatiently getting dressed and ready to leave, my phone suddenly rang. I smiled. This restaurant requires payment immediately after the dishes are served. Clearly, Calvin and his friends couldn't afford the bill, so they finally remembered me. Katerina, what the hell are you doing? Calvin lowered his voice deliberately, terrified of being discovered that he still needed to ask a woman for money. He wanted to act all high and mighty, but still needed money to spend. How could he expect such a deal? I flat out refused him. Calvin immediately got furious, his voice low but seething with anger. Katerina, do you think playing these tricks will make me come back to you? Stop being so childish. Unless you beg me, I won't forgive you. Send me 100,000 right now, or I'll never forgive you for the rest of my life. Normally, I would only order dishes worth 1,000 yuan when dining here, but Calvin went straight for the 100,000. Now that I wasn't his ATM anymore, I was intensely curious to see exactly how he intended to settle the bill. The thought made me laugh out loud. That laugh cut straight into Calvin's pride, like a needle stabbing deep into his heart. He immediately flew into a rage. Katerina, do you think your filthy money makes you impressive? I'll just pay with my scholarship. I looked down on you nouveau riche who put on airs with a couple of stinking coins. I kindly reminded him, you still haven't paid your tuition this year. Your financial aid should have been deducted for that already. The frantic tapping of the screen sounded from the other end of the line. A minute later, Calvin completely lost it. He stopped lowering his voice and yelled angrily, Katerina, what the hell have you done with my money? I just stopped the funding I was giving you. Aren't you done yet, Katerina? I want more, Samuel interrupted, wrapping his arms around me. Before I could finish, Guchen wrapped his arms around my waist, his lips against my ear as he interrupted me. His voice carried both smugness and a punchable edge. The phone on the other end fell silent for a moment before Calvin's voice exploded. Who is he? Katerina, have you really gone this far? Is there anyone you won't sleep with? Would you even fuck a dog if it wore pants? Samuel continued to provoke him. While you were busy ordering dishes, Katerina had already had her way with me in the next room. Would-be successors are aplenty. You're already history. That's what I like to hear. Calvin immediately hung up the phone and, within moments, barged into the room, kicking open the door. The waiter promptly apologized from the side. I waved my hand, signaling for them to go about their business. Calvin's eyes were bloodshot, his teeth gritted in fury. Katerina, how could you actually cuckold me? Luna cupped her hands over her mouth, pretending to be surprised. Oh my, Katerina, what are you doing here having an affair with a man? You don't look like a decent girl at all. You didn't do it here, did you? Her words successfully provoked Calvin. He rushed over and attempted to punch Samuel. Thankfully, Samuel reacted quickly and fought back. Calvin didn't get to vent his anger. Instead, he ended up being the one who got hit. His sycophants only barked, making no move to help. I looked at one of them and sneered. What? You came to visit your mother today? That shut him up instantly. How ridiculous. Calvin, knocked to the ground, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked up with furrowed brows. Katerina, the more you act this way, the less I'll ever love you. When will you stop deluding yourself? Do you think she's the type of woman who's desperate for a man? His words might have been crude, but they weren't entirely wrong. Katerina could never like you. She chased after me for a whole year. Even after the 3 years we were together, how could she not love me over 4 years? So it had been 4 years. Seeing my stunned expression, Calvin thought he had hit the mark. His panicked face reassumed an indifferent mask, and his gaze hardened with resolve as he looked at me. No woman can simply discard 4 years of shared history. Katerina is clearly just attempting to reclaim me. I raised my hand and pointed at Luna. Weren't you also with her during those 4 years with me? What did you take her for? At these words, every pair of eyes in the room instantly snapped to Calvin. He lowered his head, lost in thought, then got up from the ground. We can continue being together. Luna and I can still maintain a sibling relationship. Calvin looked guilty, not daring to cast a single glance at Luna. Luna laughed out loud, but this time her laughter carried none of her former complacency. Instead, it was more of the bitterness stemming from years of living in the shadows due to a concealed identity. She wiped away a tear from the corner of her eye, struggling to contain her anger as she spoke. Your sister? Would you do such things with your own sister? You keep claiming that Katerina used her family's influence to coerce you, that you were helpless. You're the one who can't let go, aren't you? Playing both women like fools must be so satisfying for you. Ever since your breakup with her, I've been waiting for you to acknowledge me. Yet here I remain, still just your dirty little secret. I can live in the shadows, but I won't let my child be condemned to the same darkness. Everyone froze, instinctively staring at her belly. I felt physically sick. It was a disgust so intense it turned my stomach. I remembered Calvin's words. He had slept with me as many times as he had slept with her. I thought it was just a way for him to provoke me, but it actually turned out to be true. And he even used the pretense of being siblings. How utterly revolting. Just as I was about to vomit, a hand with prominent knuckles offered me a glass of water. It was Samuel. I didn't have time to say thank you. Gulping it all down at once made me feel slightly better. Samuel, as always, gently patted my back. This scene seemed to strike Calvin like a dagger to the heart. Don't touch her. The man screamed in agony, straining so violently that he had to bend over. Luna wasn't having any of it. She stormed forward, grabbed Calvin by the shoulders, and slapped him twice across the face. Today, you must choose between me and her. Calvin was dazed, glancing confusedly between Luna and me. People are always greedy. Once they obtain one thing, they refuse to relinquish the other. I spoke up at the right moment. This isn't a binary choice for you. My blindness has long been cured. What kind of man can I get? It's better if you and green tea stay locked together. Luna was desperate for an answer, urgently demanding. Choose now. Will it be me and our baby, or that woman? Calvin shook his head. I don't know. I'm going to abort the baby right now. Without another word, Luna ran out without looking back. Calvin snapped out of his daze and chased after her. A few of his lackeys tried to leave, but were stopped by the waiter demanding payment. Mom, can you lend me money? I didn't even grace them with a glance as I walked out of the restaurant. Later, I heard that they had called all their friends but couldn't borrow any money, so they reluctantly called their families. After a series of complications, they finally settled the bill. From then on, they regarded Calvin as a thorn in their flesh. They posted over a dozen videos denouncing him. Eventually, his account was banned, marking the end of the incident. But I think they forgot something. After a week of fooling around with Samuel, I came home to find an unexpected visitor. Calvin, reeking of alcohol, staggered toward me and lunged at me. Katerina, will you come back? What was this all about? I wasn't in a rush to go home. Instead, I casually settled on the bench and watched Calvin with keen interest. I recalled a post I had seen on a certain app. Calvin had been working at a bar to supplement his household income when he was immediately noticed by a 40-year-old wealthy woman who forced him to chug 10 bottles of liquor in a row. If no one had passed by, something would have happened to him. Now that he had suffered a loss, he suddenly remembered my goodness. But I, Katerina, never revisit old pastures. I quietly watched him stage his own act. Fusheng poured the drink all over himself, the liquid dripping from his hair down his face, his pale cheeks flushing faintly. He squatted in front of me, eyes dazed. Katerina, is it really you? Did I make you sad? He gently held my hand and placed it on his face. At that moment, Calvin bore no resemblance to the untouchable Highland flower. He was more like a tail-wagging dog awaiting its owner's renewed affection. He was obedient and pitifully endearing. He started rubbing his face against my hand, imitating a cat. "Katerina, I miss you so much. Why don't you love me anymore?" I answered him with 2 merciless slaps. Calvin, a grown man, was sent crashing to the ground by my slap. I crossed my legs leisurely, speaking slowly. "Do you think you're something valuable? This bag in my hand costs 300,000, and you're not even worth as much as it. Calvin, what's with this love-struck act?" Calvin's pupils dilated as he stared at me, his mouth hanging open speechlessly. Realizing he's in the wrong, I put my legs down and was about to leave. Suddenly, my lower leg was forcefully clutched. I looked down at Calvin, feeling somewhat resigned. "Who are you putting on this act for? I love you, but I love myself more." Calvin grew desperate. "Katerina, I'll become whoever you desire. Please, please don't leave me." His voice trembled with a choked sob, revealing a vulnerability I'd never witnessed in him before. Seeing that I wasn't responding, he continued pleading, "You like puppies, don't you? I can be that for you." "What my sister likes would never be a dog." Samuel's voice came from behind as he stepped out of the house. Samuel quickly wrapped his arms around my waist and lifted me away from Calvin. Calvin glared venomously at Samuel as he rose from the ground, shedding his drunken pretense. "You opportunistic thief. What gives you the right?" Samuel jostled me in his arms and whistled provocatively. "Maybe 'cause I'm young and good in bed?" "You little opportunistic thief. What gives you the right?" Calvin gritted his teeth, so hard I could hear them grinding. He took a deep breath, his eyes firm as he looked at me. "Katerina, whether you believe it or not, I truly love you. She was just a mistake. If you won't forgive me, I'll stay kneeling here." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "An accident?" And a child came out of it. I couldn't help but snicker. Samuel, as if claiming a reward, planted a kiss on my cheek. Calvin's body stiffened, and he closed his eyes, kneeling down. That single act of kneeling shattered whatever remaining pride he still believed he possessed. I casually snapped a photo and posted it to the campus forum wall. If Calvin wants to kneel, let him. I never stopped him from getting up. The maid told me that Calvin had left after kneeling for barely over an hour. He truly had no patience. Aside from him, there were many others willing to kneel. I admit that I am rather underhanded in my methods and also exceptionally petty-minded. I quickly sabotaged the small shops owned by the families of Calvin's lackeys. I had a few people open stores right across from theirs, where whatever they sold, my prices were always 1 yuan lower. I had plenty of money, so I wasn't afraid of losses. Their families couldn't hold out for more than a few days before dragging their sons to apologize to me. "I'm the town bike. I'm the town bike." Hearing them kneel and shout those words gave me immense satisfaction. Some had bloodshot eyes, wishing they could kill me. But what did it matter? They still had to obediently beg for mercy. They still had to obediently comply and beg me to spare them. They yelled until their throats went hoarse. Night fell. I magnanimously allowed them to return. "If you want to curse me, do it privately. Whoever lets it reach my ears will be finished." They ran off like stray dogs with their tails between their legs. As I entered the house, I saw Gu Chun hurriedly locking his phone screen. "Katerina, you let them off so quickly?" Looking at the panic on the handsome man's face, his eyes darting restlessly from side to side, I immediately realized. I didn't say much and transferred 50,000 directly to Samuel. "Katerina, what are you doing?" "To be honest, I'm very satisfied with you. Not just in that way. You also helped me provoke Calvin. Plus, with this 50,000 added incrementally, you should have received around 200,000 in total by now. No need to come again. How could I not know what loving someone looks like? At that time, I urgently needed someone to redirect my feelings for Calvin. Even if he wasn't sincere, what did it matter? As long as he was clean. Like I said, I was truly pleased with him. I had even considered taking things further, but his behavior just now was too guilty. I didn't want to let myself discover another hat had been placed on my head. Taking the money and leaving was his best option. Samuel initially wanted to protest, but upon facing my icy expression, he ultimately swallowed his words. When Samuel and I broke up, somehow the news spread to everyone. My friend requests flooded in again, 99 plus, and I had no choice but to restrict the settings, which finally eased the situation. Calvin sent me texts begging for forgiveness, but I mercilessly rejected him. A younger female junior close to me mentioned this incident. She told me that Calvin stood in the rain on the sports field shouting his love for me, and fell ill the next day. He was so fragile that he seemed on the verge of collapsing at any moment. He had a high fever and kept calling my name in his feverish dreams. Many girls were moved by his profound affection and took to social media to criticize me. I immediately posted, "Calvin, I'm so cold," from that day, and the voices condemning me disappeared. Did Calvin love me? I don't know. But one thing I am certain of. He wasn't remorseful for his misdeeds, but rather disoriented by the wealth I'd showered on him over the years, so thoroughly estranged from poverty's reality that he lost all bearings. A person can endure hardship indefinitely, but once they've tasted comfort, enduring hardship again becomes unbearable. He had been humiliated while working part-time, and that heart of his could no longer endure it. It was far easier to bow his head to a woman than to a group of people. He pretended to regret his actions, acting as if he was deeply in love, but it was all for my money. Did he think a few half-hearted acts would make me grovel in gratitude? He was wrong. Terribly wrong. Soon enough he would realize that I not only woke up quickly, but I could turn my face even faster. Calvin's scandal about replacing another student in an exam quickly became a hot topic. For an entire week, it dominated the trending charts. Everyone was condemning him, urging the school to take action. The student who had been replaced immediately filed a lawsuit against him. Calvin's academic fans, once unwavering in their admiration for him, were furious. They wanted to kill this imposter who had stolen someone else's life. When the private investigator told me about this, I was shocked. Calvin was an outstanding student, but he made a mistake on the most important exam. His parents, ruthless as they were, decided to have their son replace a relative's child. Cold and detached, Calvin knew everything, yet he didn't stop his parents. He could have chosen to retake the exam the next year, but he couldn't escape the pressure of maintaining his reputation. From childhood to adulthood, the title of a genius student had become a shell that trapped him, trapping both him and his parents. When this scandal was exposed, Calvin felt deeply embarrassed and humiliated. A few times, he took pills and had to be rushed to the hospital. He begged me for help, but at that time, I was too busy catching male models at a party to care about him. The impoverished academic genius fell from grace overnight. Later, the person who had been replaced withdrew the lawsuit, and Calvin disappeared. I had seen him once. At the time, I was kissing a male model, completely absorbed in the moment. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Calvin. He was lying on the ground, wearing nothing but shorts, being dragged like a dog into the elevator. The woman with him was the same rich lady who had previously caused trouble for Calvin at the bar. She nodded at me, and I gave her a brief acknowledgement. After all, if they ended up together, I was partly responsible. I've always been a person who gets even. Calvin had cheated on me, slapped me, and now look at his fate. That woman, Luna, provoked me and even tried to put the blame on me. Of course, I couldn't let her off the hook either. At that time, when Luna said she was going to abort the child, Calvin couldn't catch up with her. She went home and did it alone. But the news of her affair had already spread throughout their neighborhood. Luna's parents had no choice but to marry her off to a distant relative. That man was abusive, hitting her even when she was pregnant. Luna had 2 miscarriages because of the beatings and couldn't get pregnant again. The man, blaming her for the misfortune, hit her even harder. Luna still called Calvin for help when her husband wasn't home, but unfortunately, her lover was useless. Aside from pretending to be morally superior, he was good for nothing. After several years of torment, Luna no longer resembled the delicate flower she once was. She had gained a lot of weight, lost most of her hair, and had deep, heavy eye bags. Luna no longer complained of being cold. Every day was a struggle to survive. Marriage was the gift I gave to Luna. When we met again, she looked like a middle-aged woman in her 40s, while I was still fresh and young, like I was 18. She kneeled before me, apologizing, saying that when she was younger, she didn't know any better and had made a mistake. After years of suffering, she had finally learned her lesson. I, being soft-hearted, helped her get a divorce. Damn, my heart was as cold as stone, though. At least Luna didn't betray me. She opened a small stall selling Kanto-style hot pot. Every day, she would ask me if I wanted some, offering it for free. At first, I suspected she might poison me, but after eating a few times, I gradually let go of my worries. These past few years, my father had been busy growing the family business. I finally got together with the male celebrity I had long admired. Being in love was great. As for marriage, that was completely unnecessary. Extra. Luna. Looking back, I realize how foolish I was when I was younger, making myself suffer all for a man. I had once hated Katerina, wondering how she could be so heartless. But as I got older, that hate dissipated with the wind. What good did hate do me? Could hate be eaten as food? And the truth was I was the one who had done wrong. Since Katerina took over her father's company, she had become busier and busier. She could barely reply to messages these days. I stared at the carefully decorated restaurant in a daze. Who would have thought that enemies could become friends? She even helped me open this big restaurant. Little pretentious coquette. I'm exhausted. Make me some noodles with tons and tons of meat, she called out. I immediately replied, got it. Life alone wasn't so bad after all.